Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bullony Basketball. This is episode number 20, and no, this is not Garrett talking. This is Johnny, and I am doing the intro for the first time ever. Thank you for listening to that, and now it is time for me. I have the pleasure to ask my buddy Garrett how he is doing on this beautiful Thursday. What's going on, Garrett?
Yeah, I thought we'd switch it up today. You guys usually hear me start off, but might as well switch things around. But I'm doing pretty good. It's not too bad. We got a decent amount of topics to discuss today, but now I can throw it back to you. How has your week been?
Yeah, it's solid. Nearing the end of the school year, so kind of follow that same curve where motivation at the beginning starts to creep up and up, up, and then at a certain point it just starts tanking. And man, are we ever tanking right now? Need to find those last breaths inside of me to get through finals, but it's near. So something else that's near is the NBA playoffs, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, tanking just like the Chicago Bulls as of late. We're in that kind of mindset. We can move on to our topics for today. The first one, and probably the most crazy one, we got to talk about Steph Curry and how he's been playing over the past several games. Of course, the other day they lost and he didn't play too well. But in terms of the 11 games before that, coming off that injury, he was averaging like 40 points, like 6 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and they were 7-4 in those games. He was shooting, I believe, like 54, 49, 90 splits, which is just like crazy to think of. But just like looking at what Steph has done over the past few weeks, do you think that, he has a legitimate case for the MVP? And if he keeps playing like this, what do you think the ceiling is this year for the Warriors?
Kind of a twofold question. So he has the numbers to be the MVP, but I don't think everything else stacks up. I don't want to say that Jokic is the runaway MVP winner, but I don't see a world in which Jokic doesn't win the MVP, assuming things happen at a normal trajectory. He's yet to miss a game. The Nuggets, while they're not a top 4 seed, or they might be the 4th seed now in the West, they're around that 4, 5, 6 seed in the West. While they're not the 1, 2, or the 3 seed, he's still done enough because if you look at those teams above him, if you're the Suns, how do you choose between CP3 and Devin Booker? If it's the Clippers, Kawhi and PG haven't played a ton of games this year. If it's the Jazz, Mitchell just went out, but is he more important than Gobert to the team? So you have those questions to ask. You head to the East, you look at those top teams, Joel Embiid. If Embiid was healthy, this would probably be a two-man race between those two for first place. But he's missed a lot of games. LeBron has missed 4 weeks of action now, and he's missed less games than Joel Embiid has this year. So if you think of it that way, like, I just don't think Embiid has played enough games. You go down in the East, you get to the Nets, the walking wounded. Those guys haven't played enough games either. Giannis has the numbers, but the Bucks aren't where they have been the last couple of years, so I don't think he has that. I could see a world in which Steph wins it, but they'd basically have to get up to the 4 seed in the West. And how likely that is, not very likely. In terms of the ceiling on the Warriors, let's see, how do you go about this? They're a team that you don't want to see in the play-in. If you're playing one game to determine if you make the playoffs or not, you don't want to face the greatest shooter to ever play the game. You don't want to face somebody who could literally score 30, 33 points in threes by hitting 11 threes in a game. Like, that's just the pace that he's on. It's incredible. I'm looking through it now. I think 4 of the last 7 games or 4 of the last 7 days, he's had more than 10 3-pointers in a game. Like, that's just an incredible pace that obviously isn't going to stick around, but he is a floor raiser, and we're seeing him do it right now.
Yeah, and even to add to that, I think he hit 72 within a 10-game span, which I believe is the most a player ever has. But
Yes.
in terms of, Curry and his MVP chances, you kind of hit it when you said he's putting up the numbers, but, of course, unless you do something that's like astronomical in terms of the stat sheet, like we saw with Westbrook in 2017, uh, you know, it's going to be hard for you to win MVP if you're like that low in seeding. And right now they're sitting at ninth, so it's kind of tough. Now, the way he's playing, though, if he keeps it up, I think that they definitely have a good chance of making the playoffs. Um, And I would even say if they had to play a team like Memphis, who's been dropping a few games as of late, and they lost to the Clippers the other day with no Kawhi, no Paul George, no Ibaka, no Rondo. So it's like they have their own problems right now too. So if the Warriors play them in a playing game, I would take the Warriors. And if they get the 8th seed and they got to play the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell, he has the injury that we don't know if he's going to be back right in time for the playoffs. It's kind of, sketchy. But I don't know. I think that they could potentially. I still wouldn't bet on the Warriors to win that series, but they could force it to maybe 6 or 7 and make it a tough battle. But yeah, I think the way Curry's playing shouldn't go unnoticed. And he's playing. It's almost like Kobe in 2013, like when the Lakers were the 7th seed, and he willed them from out of the playoff picture to go in. And although he didn't win MVP, he still finished, I believe, 3rd or 4th. It's kind of like one of those that we're seeing right now from Steph Curry.
Yeah, so just looking at the standings here quickly, Portland, the 6th seed, is 3.5 games on the Warriors. That's a lot of ground to make up, but Portland has been scuffling 3-7 in their last 10. Dallas is 3 games ahead of Golden State, and then Memphis is a game. So I don't see a world in which Golden State isn't in the play-in in some sense, but they could find themselves in the 7 or the 8 seed. Quick question for you. If you had to listen to your gut and just give a one-word answer, if you're the, so we'll answer this both ways. If you are Utah and Phoenix, would you rather see Golden State or Memphis in the first round?
I feel like I would rather see Memphis in the first round.
Okay. And now if you're Golden State, would you rather see Utah or Phoenix in the first round?
If I'm Golden State, I would rather see probably the Jazz because, they've already played Utah before, I believe in 2017, and that was one of Curry's best playoff series, if I remember. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's a different team, but, you still have a lot of the guys like Gobert, Joe Ingles. A lot of the core pieces are still there, so, and also the coaching scheme. So I feel like, especially with the fact that the Suns, they don't really have too many injury problems, and they've been winning a lot of games this year where, Devin Booker doesn't have to be scoring like crazy. Remember in previous years when it's he'd drop 50 or 70 the one time and they'd lose. Now it's Booker could have a really bad game, and I believe he's been struggling a lot recently, and yet they still win. I don't know who they beat the other day, but I think Booker, Paul, and Bridges all struggled, and they still managed to beat a pretty decent team. So, I mean, they're a scary team, and I know the Jazz are the first seed, and you got to respect them for that, and their defense has been great. But I don't know, the Suns might be a little bit more scary right now.
Yeah, I'd also say this, this is the first time in a while, I think, that you'd say that if Golden State gets the 8 seed, that you'd give them a fighter's chance at beating either Phoenix or Utah. They're both very good teams. They're both elite teams right now in the regular season, but we don't know what they're going to do in the playoffs. They don't have the Kawhi, Paul George, and granted, I know what happened last year, or the LeBron, Anthony Davis pairing. Yeah, they have Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and Chris Paul, Devin Booker, who are incredible in their own right, but we haven't seen this story unfold yet. So I think there's a lot to be seen coming up, and this could go a lot of many ways.
Yeah, and another point I was going to say with the MVP, I know how you said Jokic is probably the favorite right now. That's why I think is the favorite. And also, I mean, this isn't related to, Curry or the Warriors or anything, but I believe not only are they the 4th seed in the West now, but they're a top 5 record, and they're only a game or half a game back of Philly. So if you look at it like that, it's kind of misleading being the 1 seed in the East when Denver's right there in terms of record. But yeah, we could, if you want, we can move on and talk about the New York Knicks and how they've won 8 straight, and now they're currently the 4th seed. What do you think of how the Knicks have been playing recently?
I don't want to discredit anything that the Knicks have done because they've played incredible basketball, but I don't know what to think about them in the playoffs. Like, is their ceiling one playoff series win? Like, is that all? Like, let's just say they get the 4 seed, and right now they're projected to play Atlanta. That's a coin flip series in my mind. If it's not Atlanta, it's Boston. A coin flip series, but probably Boston might be a tougher opponent than Atlanta. And if it's not Boston, it's Miami. And Miami might be the toughest of all 3 opponents. So I don't think that they have a super high ceiling come playoff time. They've done everything right. Thibodeau should be a front runner for Coach of the Year. Julius Randle should be a lock for Most Improved Player. So I don't want to discredit anything they've done up until this point and anything that they will do in the regular season. But talking about the playoffs, I just don't know what to think of them. And if they win that first series, is anybody picking them to beat Philadelphia or Brooklyn? I'm not, and I don't think many are. So great story, great regular season story. Don't think things go too well in the playoffs.
I think the good thing though with what the teams you listed, Atlanta, Boston, Miami, if like Charlotte or Indiana gets in there, like a lot of those teams have been a little bit inconsistent most of the year in terms of offensively. Like Boston, they have Tatum and they have Brown who have played great all year long, but there's been so many games where it's like just them, and then like the other guys, kind of crumble. So in terms of the Knicks, who have had they've allowed the least amount of points per game this year. They've had like basically the top defense or one of the top defenses. I think that in terms of a playoff standpoint, I mean, we saw it. I don't want to like compare Julius Randle to LeBron and RJ Barrett to AD, but we saw it last year with the Lakers and their defense, and that was critical in terms of leading them to a championship. I'm not saying the Knicks are 2021 NBA champions, but I think with their defense being one of the top in the league, I think that they have a pretty good chance. And I would probably favor them over Atlanta. Boston, Miami, it's kind of hard because, you got arguably 2 superstars on each of those teams. And the Heat could even have another all-star caliber player if Oladipo comes back. So, I mean, it makes it tough, but I like what Julius Randle's been doing. I think that he's been one of the, along with Zion, but the first time All-Stars that have actually continued to play like an All-Star after the break. And then also the fact like RJ Barrett, he's been playing really well. Reggie Bullock, it pretty much seems like he never misses a corner 3. D Rose has been playing great, which we both love to see. And even like Nerlens Noel, I feel like watching the Knicks more and more, like this guy needs to make an all-defensive team this year. Like he's been insane, So I got to give the Knicks credit. I think that even if their ceiling is a second-round exit, that's huge for New York going forward.
Yeah, best free agent big bargain was Nerlens Noel. Shine some love, some light on Julius Randle. Should make an All-NBA team this year. RJ Barrett had that great stretch to start. I'm trying to see what his last, 6 games are. His last 6 games, he's at like 16, 4, and 2, shooting 38% from the field. So starting to struggle a bit. He had that really good run where he went from game 33 to 4. He went 14 straight games with 10 or more points. And then since then, he's had an 8-point, a 7 to 6 point game. But his plus minus looks good for the most part. So he's been playing well. He's been playing better than he did last year. So that's at least a step in the right direction. And like I said, give love to the Knicks while they're playing well. But I don't want to come crashing down on their party. With that being said, I'm not sure how far they can go come playoff time.
And it's been a story of like next man up in the recent games. I think the one game RJ Barrett and Taj Gibson fouled out and they went to overtime and they still pulled off the W. Then last night Rose fouls out, they go to overtime and they still pull off the W. So I think that's something that's pretty impressive, and a lot of the credit goes to Tom Thibodeau. But I mean, if you want, we could talk about another team that's been on a hot streak as of late, the Washington Wizards. They've won 6 straight, and they've actually overtaken the Chicago Bulls our Bulls the other day. So what do you think of the way that the Wizards are playing, and what do you think that Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook could potentially do in the play-in?
The one thing that the Wizards have is talent. Denny Avdia left yesterday's game after coming down funky, which hopefully that's nothing bad. Gafford has been their saving grace, I almost want to say. Like, since they've gotten Gafford, they've been in the middle of NBA defensive rating, whereas previous to having Gafford, they were literally in the bottom, like 2 or 3 teams. They were in the 30s there. They're in the play-in right now. They're 3.5 games out from the 8 seed. So I think it's more likely that they end up with that 9 or 10 seed. But like I said, they have talent. Like, anytime you have Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, you give yourself a shot. We saw Westbrook literally will an Oklahoma City Thunder team to the playoffs on his own. Haven't seen a whole lot of Russ and Bradley Beal play together this year, which kind of mutes some of their upside. But similar to Golden State, just not a team you want to see in the play-in. You don't want to see a team that has talent like this in a one-game series. Like, you just don't. So I give them a shot to win a play-in game or two and then find themselves in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, with what you mentioned with Gafford, it seems like every time you check the box score in the recent games, he's always like top 3 in points, top 3 in rebounds, and his effort just looks a lot better in Washington than it was in Chicago, which says a lot because he always had that intensity that he brought with the Bulls. But, having Westbrook, who's been playing really good as of late, I think he's kind of, felt upset by not making the All-Star team this year, and he's coming out and trying to prove people wrong. Bradley Beal, of course, he's had a chip on his shoulder since last year when he didn't make the All-Star team, and, he's been playing a lot better recently too. So I think, like, with them, I would like to see them face off with the Pacers as the 9 seed in that first playing game, because I believe at the beginning of the season I had them as the 7 and 8 seed. So, like, now we'll get 2 teams that I assumed would be in the playoff picture at the end of the season playing, and one of them has to go home. I think that would bring out the best in both those squads. But I think, like, the Wizards, they've been playing pretty good basketball. And, like, even the game yesterday where, Curry wasn't playing good for the most part, but the Warriors had a pretty decent lead late in the game, and they still came back and they pulled off the W. So they're basically playing the full 48 minutes, and they're kind of making the most of it right now.
Yeah. It's one of those things. Bertans is starting to play better too, so you're getting some improved shooting there. But talent is talent, and anytime a team has talent, you can't underestimate the things they do. So you just don't want to see them come playoff time. It's plain and simple. There are bad teams that sneak in, and then there are bad teams that have talent that sneak in. And Washington's a bad team with talent. You don't want to see that because they have 2 guys that can literally win a game on their own.
Yeah, and if the Nets can somehow get the first seed and the Wizards, get in, or if the Nets stay in second, the Wizards hop into the 7 or 8 seed and win the first playing game, I would be looking forward to a Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook playoff series in the first round with the Nets and Wizards. Yeah, I think a lot of people would like to see that. But speaking of the Nets, they've had some bad news with a recent injury update, and not just the Nets, but we could also talk a little bit about the Clippers. It's not really, I don't think, as severe for the Clippers' sake, but in terms of the Nets, James Harden apparently is going to be out indefinitely. They're likely going to hold him out until just about playoff time with his hamstring injury, and then Kawhi is going to get reevaluated sometime later this week for his foot. So what do you think of, this update with both these key players, because these are some of the best teams in the league?
More worried about Harden than I am Kawhi. The reason I say that is because the Nets said Harden's back to square one. So he's been dealing with this injury. It's been a nagging thing. Hamstrings aren't something you want to play around with. So more worried about him. Not only that, but him Kyrie and KD, I think, have played like a combined 180 minutes since they've been on the same team, and they've been on the same team for a couple months now. So that gives me some cause for concern. Granted, they could go out and win their first round matchup without Harden because they still have a bunch of talent. But that's something you don't want to see. Kawhi, it's more so like load management-esque things where it's little injuries here and there that are nagging him. I'm not super worried about his longevity. I'm just thinking that the Clippers are taking the necessary precautions to make sure that he's 100% come playoff time, that he doesn't have any of that nagging pain. And so I think I like the way that the Clippers have kind of carried Kawhi along throughout the season and made sure that they're keeping their players fresh.
I feel like the story is like new Clippers and old Clippers. The new Clippers, let's talk about Kawhi first. Kawhi, I don't think it's too serious, his injury. I think he should be back in time. And in the meantime, when they've had Paul George and Rondo playing, even, some games without Paul George, the Clippers have still been pretty good. We saw last year how much the team depended on Kawhi and for Paul George to play well in order for them to succeed. And as a result, they didn't. And then looking at the Nets, when we look at this is where I say the old Clippers part. Last year with the Clippers, how in those 8 bubble games seemed like they didn't have chemistry. Montrezl Harrell didn't play until the first game of the playoffs, and then Lou Williams was Lemon Pepper Lou in Magic City, and he wasn't there until the middle of the bubble games. So I feel like with the Nets, you mentioned it, 180 minutes of those big three have played together. Is that going to be enough? Because I don't think we've ever seen something like this where the stars have so little time together before the playoffs actually start. And if he comes back right when the playoffs start, because that's what they make it sound like. They make it sound like he's going to be out unless he can come back earlier, but it doesn't sound too promising. But maybe a week before the playoffs start, and that's maybe 3 games or something. So I don't really know how to feel about that, and it's also kind of concerning to know that he came back for on-court activities, the other day, and he, re-aggravated it. So now it's we got to start looking at this more closely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. So it's one of those conversations that has been had a million times, and there's still no consensus. The actual importance of chemistry and what chemistry is. It's one thing for players to be around each other for a whole year, and kind of the Paul George Kawhi, where they've both missed a decent amount of games and they kind of miss games when the other plays, but they've had games under their belt. That's not the same thing with Kawhi or with Harden, KD, and Kyrie. So I have more worry there. So I don't know. I mean, listen, talent wins in the playoffs. So assuming these teams are healthy, both of them have a very legit shot at not only going far in the playoffs, but winning the title. So it should be interesting to see what happens there. And the next person we're going to talk about is also on a team that could very well find themselves holding up the trophy for the second year in a row.
Yeah, and he's set to make his return tonight. It would be yesterday for you guys watching. Assuming something crazy happens, I saw the tweet saying there's a 99% chance he comes back tonight against the Dallas Mavericks, and that's Anthony Davis. What do you expect from AD making his return? He's missed over 30 games straight. So what do you think of AD tonight?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the minutes limit quickly because it's obviously not going to be a full-blown game. It says minutes restriction of 15 minutes. So expect him to play somewhere around 10 to 12 minutes, get a couple shifts in. For me, I'm not looking to see how well he plays. I'm looking to see how well he moves. Because this is a guy that I'm not worried about the talent of him. I'm worried about the way he looks on the court. Is he moving vertically? Is he moving horizontally? Is he able to jump? Is it looking like he's scared to make moves that he's normally made before because he's worried about that calf? So it's more so observing those kind of things than it is seeing oh, he went 4 for 4 from the field or he went 0 for 4. That means nothing to me at all. It's literally just about the way he looks on the court and how much he trusts his body.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to add there. I just think looking at how he'll play tonight, not even just like from a statistical production standpoint, but just how he's moving, how he's getting reps under him, I think over time he'll probably be at his normal about 30 minutes a game by the time LeBron comes back. And LeBron, knowing his durability history, they'll probably not be as lenient with him because he's one of the most durable athletes we've ever seen. So I'm not like too concerned about the Lakers moving forward. But who knows? He very well could go off and have one of those like Kevin Durant Game 5 2019 Finals moments and score like 10 or 15 points. But I don't know. I think that he'll be fine in the time he gets, and I think that it'll be good to see him back on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one of those things where we have to see what happens and how he looks, and then we'll be able to make some, not predictions, we'll be able to make some conclusions based off of that.
For sure. But we're going to move on to our daily picks, starting with the 23rd. We got the Celtics and Nets. Who you got here?
I got Brooklyn.
I also have the Nets taking this one. On the 24th, we got the Pistons, Pacers. What you got here?
I'm going to go with Indiana.
I'm also going to go with Indiana. It could be a trap game, though. On the 25th, we got the Bucks and the Hawks. Who you got here?
I will take Milwaukee.
I'm also going to go with the Bucks. On the 26th, we got the Grizzlies and Nuggets. They've had a lot of close games so far this year. But who you rolling with?
MPJ buzzer beater to win it.
Interesting prediction. I think that the Nuggets will win by 8 points, and I think Campazzo will score at least 21 points. I think he's going to go off. On the 27th, we had the Blazers and the Pacers. Who you got here?
40 spot from Dame. Wills him to a win.
I actually have the Pacers. I think the Blazers, they've been struggling a lot lately, so I'm going with Indiana on this one. On the 28th, we got the Lakers and the Wizards. The Wizards have been hot, but the Lakers getting AD back. Do you think that they could pull off this W?
I'm going to take Washington.
I'm going to go with the Lakers on this one. And then the last day, we got the Raptors and Nuggets. The two teams that I believe at the beginning of the year we said were struggling. We're concerned for both of them. That was like the main topic. But who you got on this one?
Not a buzzer beater, but a blowout win for Denver.
Yep, I got the team that has proved themselves since that episode. But, I mean, that's pretty much going to do it for us on this episode tonight. Any last word, final thoughts?
Nothing more to add on my end. Just as always, guys, thanks for the support. Thanks for the viewership. Thanks for all that good stuff. We'll catch you back next week.
Yep, next week it should be interesting. We're getting closer to the playoffs by the day, so we always look forward to that. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.